Good morning, everybody. Eric Nentrup with Keep Indiana Learning with yet again another partner showcase. And today I'm pretty excited about this because as a former English teacher, I needed this tool for my students. There were others that were out there that weren't nearly this elegant and not nearly this comprehensive in terms of its feature set. I'm talking about Scrible, and joining us today is CEO and co-founder Victor Kakar. And I'm super excited to bring him to you and introduce him right this second. Victor, thank you so much for taking time to sit in on this webinar and share Scrible with Indiana educators. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Yes, I'm so excited to be here with you and to be speaking with folks in Indiana. It's exciting stuff.
Well, I'm particularly interested in this product, like I said, not just because I was a teacher, but because of the skills that it helps develop with students that are interdisciplinary. They're not relegated only to the ELA program or to writing essays and doing research, but about promoting higher order thinking, critical thinking skills, problem solving, and preparing students for a post-secondary for the post-secondary expectations in college when they have to cite sources, develop cohesive arguments, and so forth. So I'm hoping you touch on those things today as we take a look together at Scrible. But before we get started, I thought I'd ask you, like, how did this come about? Like, what's your background? When did this problem just get lodged in the front of your brain to the point where you had to solve it?
That's a great question. So yes, I'm one of the co-founders, and this is my baby. So I definitely felt the need for what we've built personally, originally as a student. That was many, many years ago. But I feel like, I think when I was in graduate school is when it really got stuck in my head, because at that time, a lot of the content I was looking for was actually web-based or online. And part of what Scrible does, it helps people curate and annotate online content. That's kind of like where we started. It does a lot more than that today, which you'll see when we talk about it. But yeah, I think that's when it really kind of like got stuck in my head. And then, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you have a lot of different ideas, and this one just wouldn't go away. So eventually I decided to sort of take the leap and start the company with it. But yeah, the original need comes from my need of it as a student.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I fully appreciate that. It's interesting how while you're in grad school, a lot of, well, I shouldn't say myself, but a lot of folks that have been in education and been in grad school saw a problem and have developed solutions that now a lot of K-12 educators are getting to benefit from. An interesting cultural phenomenon when it comes to ed tech startups, for sure. But I think that this was a pretty squirrely problem for the longest time. And then all of a sudden it shot forward, like you said, when it came to citing sources on the web, or just anything that was part of, for lack of a better phrase, new media. How do you show attribution in a way that is fair and easy and keeps you focused on conducting research and looking for those next salient points that would support your argument? So I don't want to take a whole lot of time for myself talking here, but you cue me as to what direction that you'd like to go in. But I'm sure that the audience would certainly like to see Scrible and have an understanding of sort of how it fits into their workflow.
Yeah, so I think, since we're doing kind of a pre-conference webinar here, I thought what I would do is walk folks through kind of like the high level presentation that I have with some slides that gives some idea of what our background is, or the problem that we're solving, and a high level understanding of the solution. And then during the conference, we're going to be having more of a deep dive. And so we'd love to have folks join us at noon on the 15th, which is the second day of the conference, to do more of a deep dive. And we can even demo some things and take some questions and whatnot from live audience participants that join. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Sounds great.
All right. So I'm going to
put your slides up here.
Yeah. So just maybe tell me, since I can't see your face now, I'm in full screen mode of the presentation.
Yes.
If you see our title slide with the National Science Foundation logo at the top.
Looks great.
Okay, great. So
yes,
I'll just jump right in. Feel free to interrupt me if you've got any questions that or certain things that you want to chime in on. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through this and give folks an understanding of what we do. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So hi, folks. Folks in Indiana, we're really excited actually to be able to talk to you today and be involved with this conference, because it's actually our first time with this conference. And we recently have really kind of tried to focus our efforts on working with folks in Indiana. There'll be more to say about that during the conference if you want to join us, or if you want to visit our booth that's in Hoover, the conference platform. Certainly I can talk about it if Eric wants to talk about it a little bit later, what we're doing in Indiana now. But in terms of what Scrible does, we have built really what amounts to the most advanced research and writing platform anybody's ever built. And I know that's a big claim, but I feel comfortable making that claim because we've been at it for a while and we've built some pretty amazing things all together under one roof. And you also see here that there is this notion of close reading. If you think about it from the research and writing perspective, close reading has always been an important part of research because you've got to read your sources closely to identify evidence that you might need to use, let's say in your paper or your project down the road. But we also have folks now that are using Scribble sort of independent of research and writing for close reading and text analysis. And I'll hit on that a little bit later as well. Again, I'm one of the co-founders. This is my baby. I started this company because I needed something like this originally. We have been backed by the National Science Foundation early on. We are partnered and deeply integrated with Google and also with Microsoft, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So here's the problem that we've been addressing, and this gets to, Eric, what you were saying earlier about some of the skills that you think that we address, and I agree with you. We are really trying to address a really significant crisis that we see in the K-12 system, and that is that about half the students in our country, that are coming out of secondary struggle with research skills, and they're not ready for college level writing. It's a pretty well documented problem now. A lot of folks would say it starts as early as late elementary. We tend to focus on it really in secondary, but we do have folks using Scribble in late elementary as well. Happy to talk about that. But this problem is, becomes really difficult, particularly in high school, and it then continues on into college, where college instructors have historically complained that students are not well prepared in these areas when they come to them. And I don't have the slide in this deck, but we also have a slide when we're talking to folks in college about how, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily get addressed there either, because there is evidence out there that says that, when students are entering the workforce, they're also having difficulty with communication skills, and writing is definitely one of those gaps that has not been addressed well. So it is a pretty pervasive problem. It sometimes doesn't get as much, I think, airtime lately as things like STEM and coding. But it is kind of widely recognized as, I think, a longstanding sort of tough nut to crack. And what we've done is really try to understand the problem in terms of why it's so difficult for students and educators. And educators would be like classroom teachers or librarians, for example. And if you think about it, it is a pretty logistically complex learning process where if you think about a student writing, let's say, a 5-page paper, they have to do a lot of things to get to that final work product, right? They've got to go out and find the right information. They've got to curate that so they can reference it again later. They've got to annotate the important parts to kind of identify the evidence that they might want to claim, they might want to cite later in their paper. They've got to keep track of their citations to create a bibliography. They might be creating an outline and then a draft of the paper and then getting feedback and then iterating on any one of those different steps along the way based on feedback from a teacher or from a librarian. And these things usually take certainly days, if not weeks, and sometimes even months, depending on the length and the complexity of the paper or the project. Sometimes they're collaborative, which adds a whole other kind of level of complexity to it. And because of all these different tasks, historically, there's never been kind of a single app or solution that kind of helps you work through the whole process, right? And so historically, students and educators have had to cobble together a lot of different tools to do different parts of the workflow. So they might have used a standalone citation tool, and then maybe a PDF annotation tool or kind of a reference manager, like maybe a legacy desktop product. Then they might be using a web clipper because, of course, so much information lives online, and they may need to get information that's out there on websites. And you're pulling information from the open web. You're pulling information from databases like EBSCO and Gale, things that your district or your library is probably paying for, in your school. And it just basically is kind of a hot mess of different apps and tools and workflows that have to get cobbled together to get through the process. This makes it really easy for students to not be organized and have scattered work across all these different ways of working. And an unfortunate byproduct of that is that for teachers and librarians, it becomes really kind of laborious and hard to teach and track students through that process, right? Because all the student data and work is trapped in all these different data silos. You've got to manage different accounts, and it's not just one student, it's multiple students. And so the problem kind of multiplies depending on how many tools you're using and where the information resides. So at Scribble, what we've really tried to do is address this by simplifying the whole process and essentially building all those capabilities under one roof. And so we've built what we like to call a super app for research and writing, because it is the first time I think somebody's really kind of taken a lot of these capabilities and put them under one platform, kind of a first fully integrated streamlined solution. And so that is something that we're proud of, and it's something that's taken a long time to build, because we're essentially building. We've basically built, like, depending on how you count, 3 to 5 different apps worth of stuff in one sort of super app platform. And that has certain benefits, which we'll talk about. But I think maybe this is a good time to let folks actually see a brief 2-minute video that we had made recently that will give you a high-level understanding quickly of, how the platform works, particularly from the student side. There's a lot of things on the educator side that are not sort of detailed in this video, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that after the video. But I think that might be a great thing to do right now. And I think you have it teed up. Is that right, Eric?
I do. Let's bring this in here, and I'm just going to go full screen with this guy.
Okay.
Real fast. And while I'm doing this, I want to come back to something else after the video or towards the end of our time together here as I go full screen. It's that whole notion of what students bring in terms of lack of confidence, and particularly if they're missing skills. Like, that's part of the problem too. And I think Scribble is going to help with confidence, because it's making the labor less intensive.
That's a great point. Happy to talk about that. I agree with you.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Until now, students have had to use multiple separate tools for their research and writing work, making it time-consuming, frustrating, and hard to stay organized throughout the process. Scribble unites this disjointed workflow by bringing everything together under one roof. It's a super app for students, educators, and librarians to curate, annotate, cite, and write. With Scribble, curating information is easy. Scribble saves web pages, PDFs, and database articles instantly to a cloud-based library with just a click of the Scribble Chrome extension. You can also add files like PDFs from your desktop and Google Drive. You can richly annotate articles directly in the browser, and even collaboratively annotate with others in real time. Citations are generated automatically. Scribble pulls citation information from articles and books and instantly displays the properly formatted citation. The Scribble library stores a wide variety of file and information formats. Stay organized by using full text search and tags to find articles. Scribble also empowers the writing process. Quickly generate an outline by dragging and dropping quotes and comments from your Scribble library. In Google Docs, the Scribble add-on allows you to access your library so you can easily insert your outline and bring your evidence, comments, and citations into the paper while automatically updating your bibliography. Scribble is deeply integrated with Google for Education, including roster sync and assignment integration with Google Classroom.
Oh, yeah.
Scribble also offers rich analytics for tracking student progress in real time. Quickly see which students are struggling and where they're stuck. Scribble centralizes student work, making it accessible in one place and enabling educators to easily provide timely feedback throughout the entire process. For students, Scribble frees up valuable time wasted on manual and mundane tasks for higher level learning, like reading critically for quality evidence and crafting strong arguments. For educators, Scribble enables personalized instruction for close reading, research, and writing. Sign up for a free account today and see what Scribble can do for you.
That video still makes me smile, because I think about how much I sold my students on my cobbled together ways of making things easier. And fast forward a few years, you guys have executed it elegantly. I can't help but smile, because I've presented on this topic. You've nailed it, Victor. It's such a good platform, and to keep it right there within whichever word processor you choose, to me, makes it authentic compared to other suites that I've seen that have their own little writing box within their platform that the students will never use outside of the assignment or outside of my unit or my semester. And that always bothered me as an educator who had a prior experience of working in the business world before. So I can just gush on it. That's so cool. So I'll shut up and bring your slides back up if you like. But wow,
yeah,
so well done.
I will just say before we go back to the slides that that was really important to us. Part of our design philosophy is that we try to essentially meet people where they're at, right? So a way we could have gone, which we didn't, and I'm glad we didn't, is that we basically have our own writing space where, we've got our own word processor. And we figured, well, why reinvent that wheel? People are using Google Docs and Microsoft Word. We can kind of focus on those and meet people where they're at and integrate with those platforms, because they, both companies, make it possible for us to do that. And so that's what we've done, right? And I think one of the shortcomings sometimes of solutions in K-12 in general is that they become these walled gardens that make it really hard for people to then maybe use that platform or translate that experience to what it's going to be like when they go to college or when they go to the work environment. And part of what I think we've done at Scrible, and we've tried to do this, and I think it's worked out naturally, is we tried to build something that you could use across K-12, college, and the workplace. And therefore, the writing that we're supporting is the more authentic kind of writing that you are really going to do down the road when you go off to college and the workplace. And so it's not just like, hey, we're teaching you how to do things with training wheels that you're only ever going to appreciate while you're in, training wheel mode. But we're trying to give you some tools that you could then use down the road, to use a mixed metaphor. So I think that that has been pretty important. And I think that's part of what actually makes it easy for teachers to integrate to their classroom, because we do integrate with the Google Suite as well as the Microsoft Suite. And that video that we showed is obviously very Google focused. But I'm going to show you here in a minute on a different slide that essentially all the things you saw in the video that we do for the Google ecosystem, we have done replicated into the Microsoft world. So we do that for Microsoft schools and districts as well with that suite of products.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, I'd like to see some of that.
All right.
I'll bring your slides back up if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Oops. Let's see. Kick back to. All right. So tell me if you see the slide we left from, which was the kind of video slide.
Yes, that's the one that's up.
Great. So now I've gone on to the next slide. So you should see some graphs or a graph on the slide. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're seeing.
Great. So what I wanted to do is, before we go on to talking about some of those other products that we integrate with, I wanted to just basically dive a little bit deeper into the analytics piece, because it is mentioned in the video, but it's gone over very quickly at the end. And this is important, I think, because it really could be a game changer for how teachers are able to manage their time when it comes to helping students through the research and writing process. So this is an example of, let's say, a teacher view of an assignment at the classroom level, where we can show them in the assignment dashboard, for example, how many students have started the research or not, started the paper or not, or met certain goals, like having a certain number of citations or words in the paper. And the nice thing is that it gives you this kind of eagle eye view of the landscape. So you can see where everybody's at. And more importantly, you can now see, like, hey, here are the 5 students that haven't even started the research yet, even though the paper's due in 3 days. And now you know where to focus your time and energy, right? We also have the data at the individual student level, where we can show you, for example, that Jordan here has collected 6 articles. She's met the first goal of having 5 cited sources in the paper, on her way to meeting the goal of having 1,000 words in the paper.
Oh my gosh.
Susan here is a rock star because she's all in the green and says she's already turned it in. Kara here still has a lot of work left to do. All things that would be great to know sooner rather than later, so that you can sort of jump in as you need to help, let's say, Kara or other students that might be falling behind or kind of getting off track before it gets too late in the game. And that timeliness of that formative feedback, we feel like, is really important for this kind of work, because these things, again, oftentimes are lengthy. And if you don't find out until late in the game that Kara hasn't done much, there isn't necessarily a great amount of time to kind of help her catch up without a lot of time stress, which might affect the quality of her work. Or you certainly don't have time necessarily to kind of do the whole thing over from scratch. And so part of our philosophy is that we're trying to empower teachers and librarians with real-time data that can help them make better decisions about how to spend their time and who to spend it with. And historically, certainly pre-pandemic, a lot of the way that this work was accessed and assessed by teachers was the classic one-on-one in-class check-in, right? So this Tuesday, I'm going to sit down with every student and look at all their sources. I'm going to spend 5 minutes with everybody. Next Tuesday, I'm going to spend 5 minutes with everybody and look at their outlines and so forth. And the reality is, you might want to spend 10 minutes with Kara and 0 minutes with Susan. But the reality is, you oftentimes don't know that until you've already kind of invested the time in the non-optimal way, right? You've essentially wasted some time.
Sure.
And so part of what we're trying to do is say, hey, look, if we can give you access to their progress data at any time, you can look at it when you are, during prep period during the day, or when you're at home, and essentially make better decisions about how to spend that really precious limited class time, where you can sit with them face to face and focus on the things that need to be focused on with the students that really need that help. And so we're really trying to help teachers optimize essentially the most precious commodity that they have, which is their time, especially now with teacher shortages and people dealing still with the implications of the pandemic. And so that has a lot to do with, I think, how this can help manage otherwise what we've been told is kind of like a beastly process of managing this work.
Sure.
And last thing I'll say about the slide, and then I can pause or we can move on to the next slide, is that this last column is a little bit different. This last column is actually about the content itself. So historically, students are pulling information together, and you oftentimes don't know what they've used unless you've done a deep dive and sat down with them to look at their sources, or you don't find out until you've gotten their works cited page or something like that, right? Here, what we're able to do is we're able to give you earlier visibility into the sources they're using, because when they curate that into Scribble, we're able to automatically categorize that in buckets and into some major categories. So, for example, if I was in the actual app and I hovered over these pie slices, you'd see that 2 of these are coming from government websites. One of these is a Wikipedia article, which might be a no-no in terms of quoting from a credible source. 2 are coming from academic websites and so forth. We're also compatible with databases like EBSCO and Gale and JSTOR and things like that. And so we can actually show you as well, not just what open web sources they're pulling information from, but also which databases that you're paying for that they're using or not using. And so what this really does is it starts to get us into the realm of media literacy, because you can begin to see the diversity and credibility of sources that they're using. And that, as you know, has become a lot more important over the last couple of years, given all this concern about misinformation and disinformation. Our students actually using credible sources and where they're getting the information from. So we don't have a magic wand per se, but we have something that'll give you earlier insight into where they're getting their information. And we have more work planned down the road in terms of media literacy. So just, for folks that are interested in that, that might be really useful.
Super important, but I sort of like how this approach prioritizes, let's see here, how to summarize this quickly. I see lots of angles towards equity in terms of making the writing process and the research process, and thus the student's voice further promoted to the front. I see that you could, even with looking at that source type graph on the last slide there, acknowledge that the student found some things on their own, but they may not be in band for the assignment. They may not be the quality, the high enough quality of a source to include in the finished product. But you can have a pointed conversation with a student and say, stay curious with them and say, well, this is interesting. Explain to me how you came about this. And it might be a simple answer, such as it was the first link I clicked on. But more so than that, I'd like to think it's a chance for them to say, well, I found this because it's a website, because I'm passionate about this topic, and I've been following this writer for a while. And as a teacher, I've got to pause and actually maybe validate a source for them. As long as it's in scope with whatever rubric I'm using for the particular project. So this is, you're giving me some unexpected professional learning that would have changed my classroom practice for certain, recognizing how arbitrary deadlines shouldn't artificially weight the grade, that sources that the student come up with might be valid, and even if it's not what I'm looking for. So this is opening up new things to reflect upon as a teacher in their practice when it comes to teaching writing. And it's tough enough on its own. We need it to be reprioritized if we're going to translate that to a modern world where, misinformation is something that we need to get better at in terms of our writing instruction and that media literacy and so forth. But just to summarize, this is all transmogrifying the way I would approach teaching writing.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear you say that. And I think part of what we're able to do is we're able to kind of essentially make a lot of things visible and easily accessible from a teacher standpoint that normally weren't. And I think that in and of itself can have a lot of unintended positive consequences, right? Just in terms of, okay, if I can see things I couldn't see before, if I can see real-time progress, I can see what kind of sources they're using, I can see where they're stuck in the process. As a teacher who knows my students well, I can do all kinds of things that I might not have been able to do before, or I might have been able to do, but would have required a lot of lift on my part. And now it becomes a lot easier, so I can use that time better to do those things. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think the beauty is that, we're able to do it in this kind of consolidated way across the whole process.
And like you said, meeting people where they are and with the tools that they have, and not forcing them to adopt something different.
That's right. And so maybe that's a good segue to this slide, which is, again, the video talked about the stuff on the left, but the stuff on the right is also stuff that we do. And we haven't formally announced it, but I'll just kind of tell you now that we're also working on a Microsoft Teams integration. So if there are folks who are listening to this that are using Microsoft Teams, know that is coming down the pike as well. And we hope to have it out this coming fall.
Fantastic.
And then also, those are not the only 2 platforms that we integrate with. We also work really well with these other platforms. We're integrated with, Clever, Schoology, ClassLink, and Canvas. in the various ways that are described on the slide. We're partnered with all these organizations as well, except for Schoology, but that partnership I think will come probably later this year, hopefully as well. And so again, our goal is really to try to meet folks where they're at. I know that a big concern, now and probably for some time, especially through the pandemic, was that with teachers being overwhelmed, they don't want to have, one more thing. And
Right.
from our perspective, we're trying to minimize that learning curve by integrating with things and making it easier to work with things that they already know. So I think that's a help as well.
Sure.
What I want to do is also just take a couple minutes, if you're okay with it, to broaden people's views of us, because I think a lot of folks naturally tend to think of us for research and writing because that's what we focused on here and what most people know us for, because that's what we lead with. But as I mentioned at the beginning, many people have looked at Scribble and said, well, hey, we don't do a lot of research and writing, or maybe we do, but only in later grades. But we see applications for the annotation platform that's within Scribble for literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to kind of hit on a couple of reasons why that is, why people are looking at Scribble and saying, hey, this could be really useful for close reading and text analysis as well. So the first thing is probably obvious, right? Annotation has always been a great mechanism to help students engage with the text. I think what's unique about what we've built is that it is both, it works across content types, the major content types that really matter, which is PDF and web annotation. So for web, there've been a lot of companies since the .com boom that have tried to crack the nut on web annotation. And I guess I'm proud to say that I think we've kind of done it, because we've managed to get a novel algorithm under the hood that lets us do web annotation in a really robust way. And it just sort of works the way that you would expect and hope in a traditional experience with a PDF annotation tool or something like that. And the second thing is we've actually built our own PDF viewer and annotator that's built right into the system. Is built in the browser. So it's cloud-based. And what that means is that those two things together, the kind of advanced web annotation with our own PDF viewer, means that in one platform, you can annotate both web and PDF content, which is not historically true. These things work. And so you don't have to use two tools, not one for web stuff and another, it all kind of works together. The second thing is that, like Google Docs, we've built our annotation platform to work real-time collaborative. So, in Google Docs, people love, you can have 3 people editing the same document at the same time. In Scribble, if you wanted to do small group text analysis synchronously, you could have 3 or 4 students in there, and they're highlighting and commenting and replying to one another's comments, and everybody's seeing each other's changes in real time. And what's nice is we've built what we think of as presence awareness into the application, so that you can see who else is in the article at the same time as you, just like you can see in the Google Doc who's in there with you. And we've been told that could be a game changer for doing, small group text analysis in class, because historically it was pretty clunky. And then the other thing is that, unlike traditional or even newer literacy apps, we are not a content provider. So we don't have a horse in that race. We're not saying, hey, you should use Scribble because our content is better. We basically are agnostic. We say you can bring in content from anywhere you've got access to, whether that's a database online or a PDF on your desktop. You can bring that stuff into Scribble and do all the magical things that you want with it. And the last thing is that we have this notion of a library is kind of like really central to Scribble, right? That's where all your stuff resides when you're doing research. But if you are a teacher, you can basically create what we call a class library that allows you to have a repository that all the students have immediate access to. And so you can quickly and easily curate texts from different places, drop them into the class library, and everybody has access to them right away. So it's a really easy way to create like a curated reading list if you want to do that. And so that's another reason why this could be really helpful as well. Does that make sense?
So glad you said it. Does make sense, and I'm so glad you said that, because I used to tell my students, I've got a curated bookshelf here, digital bookshelf, and it's because like early high school writing instruction, when you're trying to get to the point where you want them to build resilience climbing that hill, because let's be honest, writing is hard. And in order to do that, you can take out of the equation the hunting and scavenging for sources, and which we all know casting that net far and wide is going to elicit a lot of results that you have to say no to, which demoralizes a student. Right. So why not just, take that finding sources lesson out of the equation and make it such that you've got a bunch of things that they can respond to immediately, especially if you've curated some really engaging texts where students see their interests, or work with them in a separate unit to build that shelf before getting into the reading or into the writing, by focusing it first on that close reading aspect too. So cool.
That's right. And you could do that with, students that are not used to doing their own research yet, like in earlier grades, for example, and that could be part of a research experience, or just for close reading by itself, independent of whether there's any research or not. You could use it in those two different ways. I know we're kind of winding down now in time, so I wanted to just say, we've also built these assistive features that were requested of us by special ed directors and other folks out there. And these are not new capabilities in the world, but we've managed to combine them with annotation, which allows us to provide some new experiences that people haven't seen before. So since we're short on time, I think what I might do is say, if you want to join us during our session at noon on Tuesday, or I guess the second day of the conference, then on the 15th, then I'm happy to do a little bit of a demo of this stuff and show how it's a little bit different than what people have seen maybe in other products and apps in the past. So there's that.
Did I take your slide away too quickly? There we go.
Yeah, I just can you show it again? I just want to make sure I show two things really quick, and then we're done. I just want to leave people with this notion that it's not just for humanities, because a lot of times when people think of research and writing, they think of English papers, and that's true. You can certainly use Scribble that way, but we have applications for how you can use Scribble in the sciences, and sometimes that looks like English where you're writing a paper, but sometimes it might be like you're working on a project where there's no paper at the end of it, right? Maybe a science fair project where there's a poster. Yet a lot of the work that you have to do, where you're doing background research and curating your sources and maybe even having a bibliography for your poster, those are all things that we can help with. And the reason why you have that level of flexibility is because we've built a platform that you don't have to eat the whole enchilada. You can take the parts that you need that are relevant for the type of work or assignment or lesson that you're working on. And that's why it is pretty broadly applicable and can be used in a lot of different ways. So to close out, I'll just sort of say, when it comes to research and writing, kind of refocusing on that, it is, the kind of work that every student has to master in this kind of modern information age that we live in. It is written into a lot of state and national standards. It is the kind of work they have to do in a big way when they go to college, where they write term papers, or knowledge economy jobs where they've got to create, RFP responses and market research reports and grant proposals and all kinds of things. And that is the kind of work we're trying to help students develop skills to be better at as they go on from high school and beyond. We've already talked about this a little bit, but our sweet spot tends to be secondary, and I'd say humanities and general science are places where we can help. These are the specific kinds of programs or projects that we can help with, and these are the kinds of initiatives at the district level historically that we plug into really nicely. And I'll just close by saying the college and career readiness is a big one for us. We were very fortunate to receive an award in December. It's a new industry award. It's called the Soup's Choice Award, sort of like a People's Choice Award for EdTech, where it was judged by superintendents across the country. And we were given the award for college and career readiness. And we were also, I think, finalists for literacy and for critical thinking solution. But the college and career readiness is the one that we were awarded. And one of the reasons why I think we won that is because we've done something rather unique, I think, when it comes to K-12 EdTech solutions. We've built Scribble in such a way that students can actually take their data and their account with them when they graduate from high school. They can take that with them to college. And I'm happy to talk about how that works. If folks want to join us on the 15th, I can kind of explain that in some detail. But yeah, so maybe I'll stop there and see if you've got any final comments or anything that we need to talk about.
I've already gushed enough. I will just say that the goods are there. I definitely would have been a user of this while I was a classroom teacher, and you might still convince me that even as a professional writer, I need to be using this daily. It's as I should be able to, as I should, and I want to congratulate you on the award, but more so for the hard work that you and your team have put into making this what it is. It's truly universal. It is broadly useful, and it should be in every classroom in the United States. That's what I think.
Thank you. Well, we're trying to do our part to spread the word in Indiana. We're hoping to work with a lot of Indiana teachers and librarians and educators and students. So this certainly helps, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do this with you and work with Keep Indiana Learning.
Everybody, Victor from Scribble, come see his presentation on at the conference itself on the 14th and the 15th next week. I do believe we're going to do one more pre-conference webinar, and we're going to get a little further into the weeds on Monday. So if you'd like to take another look before committing, you shouldn't need much more convincing than what you saw today. Scribble's got the goods, as I said. So thank you so much for attending. Victor, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being a part of this conference.
Of course. Thank you so much. Take care.
Absolutely. Everyone, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for attending.